So it's day 3, and we're going to talk about trust and innovation in the digital era. So this is the digital health session. And as many of you already know, although we seem to have lost the big map, but this is the final frontier in the innovation session. So for those of you who have been following the track and stayed on the metro line, today is coming after a number of sessions all around ethical AI, reimagining value in personalized care, and also that wonderful capacity building session that we've had this morning for the first time in PEOF, where we need to set level playing fields about what exactly we're talking about. And certainly from my perspective in digital health and how patient engagement can become embedded in how digital health innovation can flourish, the term digital health is often too broad for me to actually find, okay, well, what exactly are we talking about? Because it encompasses so many different types of technologies. It encompasses so many different types of uses of data that very often the conversation tends to either stay very broad or get very focused on a single issue. So what we are attempting to do with this panel and with the discussion today is to open up that conversation, but to have as many perspectives as possible, so that we can actually bring an action forward for not just the organizers of PEOF or the different respective organizations, but for us individually. And then after this session, I'm going to be involved in the closing plenary, where that will come forward in terms of a question to that closing panel. So very much looking at this session, it comes in the following format. So we're going to go for, I think we've 2 hours, so we've plenty of time to work with you. And it's not just those of us who are in the room. So this is being streamed online, and we're going to have Q&As coming through from the interested public. And I think when I think about digital health, and I think about the key aspect of digital health that from a patient engagement perspective is different to other areas of health, it is obviously the area of trust and transparency, because PFMD has been doing a lot of work in this area, not least of which is a publication, a stakeholders expectations matrix that for those of you who were here last year, we would have presented, and there's been a public consultation since on, but also the patient engagement roadmap that has been ongoing for a number of months in terms of taking that digital life cycle approach to patient engagement, in terms of the ideation phase, in terms of identifying the unmet need and applying the kind of co-design and lean techniques to patient engagement within a digital sphere. So again, that roadmap is a perfect avenue to take forward the actions and outputs that we will hopefully take from our session.
Thank you.
But definitely this quote from Clive Weatherall really resonates with me, because when we actually dig a little deeper into transparency and trust, we have a lot of global guidelines and global platforms that are looking at measures of transparency, and they're very important. But how does that translate then into how you
Thank you very much.
Build
Do you hear me?
A culture of trust and transparency,
and
either within
do you
your
also
organization
hear
or
the sound of Derek?
different silos?
Yes, I do.
It's very obvious
perfect.
that from
Thank
a
you very
patient
much.
engagement
Can you please?
perspective, transparency can mean
show
different
slides?
things, and the types of information
Sorry?
that you
Can I show my slides?
as being valuable to
Hold
you,
on. You have separate
that
slides?
there is a degree of
I do have
trustworthiness
slides, yes.
associated
And
with
they are not
any
included in the
partnership that
deck
you're
here?
getting into for a digital health
Do we have
perspective.
I did
slides?
not.
What does that look like? And I'm hoping that we'll get into that in terms of the
Hold-
I
questions,
don't
hold on,
think
Barbara.
we're
in terms of the
Hold on,
practical
we'll check.
types of just simple
Rick?
one-step solutions that would make a big difference to moving the needle towards what we believe patients want to see in this area.
Yeah, there are
So
slides prepared,
the panel is, and I'll
but
be
you're not aware of that.
asking each of them to
No, I have my own slides here. Can I still share them?
themselves and to say maybe why you're here at PEOF and why you've come
Hold on, I'll check.
to be part of this panel. And we have also, we're being joined by Barbara Prenzak from the University of Vienna. And Barbara has been working with a number of stakeholders in developing a concept known as data solidarity. And some of you may have heard of this, but it's very much grown out of the term data altruism.
You can share your presentation. Please go ahead.
I guess really kind of talked about in the European context when the regulation for the European health data space was being drafted. And it has since evolved into the concept of data solidarity. So, and this is where really the leading edge of where an awful lot of digital health is. Because when we look at the adoption of technologies and the types of requirements, the types of assessments that are being done about the utility of these technologies, very often it comes down to whether or not people want to gain access to the information that is being used for different purposes, or whether they wish to stop the uses of information based on their own preferences and their own agency as part of that. So, so we're going to get Barbara to talk a little bit about setting the scene around data solidarity, and then we'll go to the other panelists for their perspectives about really what is the key issue for digital health right now. And there, we're going to go into a Q&A in the room about that. What is the biggest upfront issue for you? So I'd ask you to think about that question while the panelists are speaking, and I will go straight into Barbara, if Barbara is online and can join us.
Yes, hello, good morning. Can you hear me and see
Barbara,
me?
you're very welcome.
Good morning. Can you hear and see me?
We can hear you and we can see your slides.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So, first of all, thank you very much for accommodating my participation online. We have the end of term and exam period here, and as an academic, I have to be with my students at the moment. So thank you very much for the kind introduction as well. I'm going to talk for about 15-20 minutes about what data solidarity is and why I think it's important. And I'll start with highlighting a study that I'm sure many in the room are familiar with. It's, to the best of my knowledge, the largest study on people's opinions and people's views of how their health data and the DNA data should be used. It's a study led by Anna Middleton in Cambridge. It's called Your DNA, Your Say. And what this study shows, there's much more on the website, it's that a lot of people would not be happy, and this is data from many countries all over the world, a lot of people wouldn't be happy sharing their health information with company researchers, and even a significant amount of people wouldn't want to share their information for health research, and even with their own doctor. So, of course, trust in people's own doctors is higher than trust in other entities, but still, I think we do have a problem with trust and maybe also trustworthiness of the systems within our data are used. And if we read the news and if we hear about stories where people's data were leaked or information was used without the full knowledge, then maybe this doesn't come at a big surprise. At the same time, what I'd like to highlight is that social science research really shows that people aren't egotistic entities. It's not, when people share data, it's not about wanting to benefit individually. It's typically really about creating a benefit for society, for other people. And what's important for people is that their data aren't used to harm others and themselves. So it's really about something that we call the public value of data use. We use the notion of public value because other terms such as public interest, it's a binary thing. Something is either in the public interest or not. And it has been used by all kinds of corporations to say that everything they do is in the public interest. So the notion of public value that data solidarity uses is a different one. I'll say more about that in a moment. But the key thing here is that empirical data shows across the board. I'm not going to go through the details of these results of the Your DNA, Your Say study. Across the board, people are hesitant to share their data, but they want to know that when they share the data, it will benefit other people, it will benefit society, maybe also benefit themselves. They also want to have they want to retain some control individually over their data. And this is the third point here on the slide. They really want to know who is using the data, who will benefit, who will bear the cost. So for what purpose will the data be used? And a couple of other things that are all here, that are all on the Your DNA, Your Says website. So why is there trust and trustworthiness problem? Of course, data use creates a lot of benefits. But one issue is that the way that we think about data and the way that we regulate data is stuck in the paper age. So some of the categories and some of the instruments that we use are really categories and instruments that were appropriate in the paper age and are not appropriate to the digital age. Let me just give you some examples. So almost all data governance framework all around the world differentiate between personal and non-personal data. But there's so many data sets that are meaningful to people, although they're not personal data in the legal sense. Data about family members, about our environments, and so on. Also, this difference between human and non-human data that data governance framework make, it's not really appropriate because humans are also part of the environment. But what might be most important for the context here is that governance approaches very much focus on data types. So this is what this slide also shows. In the paper age, there were different types of data that were seen as more risky to use than others. But this is not good enough in the digital era because when you can link different data sets, you can make inferences regarding individuals and groups from almost any type of data, environmental data, aggregate data sets about health statistics, income brackets. So almost all data that are available could be used to make inferences regarding specific peoples and groups that can benefit them, but it can also harm them. So long story short, we really need a very, very different approach to how we even think about data. So I don't want to become too technical, but I think the kind of relationality of data, the fact that they come out of relationships and they represent relationships, they represent connections between family members, between friends, between social groups, between different inhabitants of our ecosystems, which is relevant for environmental data, not so much for health data. But data, they really represent and come out of relations. And those relations are edited out in our data governance frameworks. So that is a problem. It's also a problem because there are frequent comparisons between data and oil. Data are then only an economic resource, and the idea is, this is what you can hear what you can see on the slide here. It's an image from The Economist. It's because this relationality is edited out of our debates and our data governance frameworks that enables companies to claim that, whoever collects the data can benefit from them economically. And what is made invisible is what we all, as citizens, as patients, as family members, as people who go about their lives doing stuff online, we create those data. We also own them in a moral sense, if not in a legal sense, and we own them collectively. So this oil metaphor is deeply misleading. Now that I've talked about the problems, I'll talk about solutions. So data solidarity is an approach that a couple of colleagues all over the world have been developing over the last 15 years. It really asks different questions about how we use data. So it doesn't only ask, is this data set personal or not? If it's not personal, then the data protection frameworks don't even apply. That's not what we ask. We ask, so who actually contributes to the production of the data? Who benefits from it? Who should benefit? And how can we share both the benefits and also the harms? Some harms will occur. How can we share them more responsibly and more fairly across society? So there's a global justice dimension, but there's also a justice dimension within our society. So the people who contribute are not always the ones who benefit. And that in turn explains some of the low trust in data sharing. So the data solidarity approach, so there's a very short article in the Lancet Digital Health that really explains in a nutshell what the data solidarity is. It's an approach to data governance and data use that tries to make it more equitable and more fair. And I think that's the key thing, it tries to get us out of this idea that either it's all about the risks or it's all about the benefits. We need to really look at both in conjunction. And that's what we're trying to do. So data solidarity has 3 pillars. The first pillar, and many of you in this room will recognize this, the first pillar says, when data use is likely to create a lot of public value or known to create a public value, let's make it easier. I think we can all tell stories of where data couldn't be used because there were regulatory or ethical requirements that didn't really protect any people, but they were there as an obstacle. And very often, non-profit research, charities, public universities are seen to face hurdles for data use that some, for example, online applications don't have, right? So when data use is likely to create public value, let's make it easier. Let's remove regulation that might not help, might not really protect anyone. It's just there. And let's also support this type of data use with targeted funding wherever possible. The second pillar of data solidarity is what we call prevent and mitigate harm. So there are data uses that we know only create commercial benefits for a few, and they are known to harm people. So let's prohibit those data uses. Let's not make them more ethical, let's prohibit them. And in those cases where harm still occurs, we need better harm mitigation mechanisms. So I don't want to go into this because it could become quite technical, but there is on this slide, you will see 2 things. You will see one article where we discuss in detail what harm mitigation is, and there's also a white paper that we published together with our colleagues at the Digital Transformation for Health Lab. It's a white paper that really gives a lot of policy instruments about how to realize data solidarity. But to stick with harm mitigation for another moment, harm mitigation is not risk reduction. It means that despite our best efforts to prevent harm, some harm still occurs. Let's make sure that people are helped pragmatically, and also if they don't have access to legal remedies. Very often harm occurs despite no law being broken, because something happens online that isn't even illegal, but people nevertheless suffer consequences. So here we need to have, as a society, we need to have much better ways of reacting to this unbureaucratically. So I won't say more here, but if there are questions, I'm very happy to say more. So the first pillar was, let's make data use easier when it's likely to create a lot of benefit. The second pillar says, prevent harm. If we can't prevent it, let's mitigate it. And the third pillar says, when there's data use that doesn't really help people so much, but it creates financial profits for companies, that's fine. But more of those profits need to come back to the societies that created the data in the first place. Because data are not like oil, they're not in the ground to be taken out. They're created by patients, they're created by citizens, and some of those profits need to come back to societies. Those are the three pillars. So, and everyone who has listened carefully probably has this question, what is public value? She's always going on about public value. What is it? So I start with a sort of abstract definition, and then I tell you how we practically can assess it. So the abstract definition is, it's a bit wordy here on the slide. It means public value is really when the data use is likely to benefit a lot of people and at the same time doesn't put anyone at risk. That is public value. So both needs to be the case. It's not just saying great benefits are super, even if it harms a few. That's not what we're saying. We're saying public value is positive only if you have a data use that is likely to create a lot of benefit and at the same time doesn't harm people or doesn't put people at risk. Okay, so how do we realize that in practice? We have created a tool. This tool is a prototype. So it's not that we are saying we know how to assess public value. It's really a prototype that can be used by anyone to rebuild the tool to fit the specific needs of your communities, specific needs of an organization. We also have some public bodies in some countries that want to use it. So this is really to be understood as a prototype. It's an online tool that anyone can use who wants to inquire about the data use of the hospital that wants their data, or a company who wants to use their data. Or if you work for a company, you can see, how can I increase the public value that our work at our company is creating? So that's the tool. The tool, for anyone who fills in the tool gets a result in one of those 4 quadrants. If the blue dot is in the green quadrant, it means that the data use that you've asked about is likely to benefit a lot of people and doesn't put anyone at risk, right? So that is the type of data use that should go ahead. It should be easier for you to use data in this case. If you're a patient who's asked to give your data away for research, if you fill in the Pluto tool and the result is in the green quadrant, it's an indication that this is very, very good data use. It should be supported. In the red quadrant, it's the opposite. It means that this data use really shouldn't go ahead because the likely benefit for real people is low and the risks are high. And in the intermediary quadrants, it means that either the risks are high and the benefits are high, so the risks need to come down, or the risks are low and the benefits are low. That's fine. It then probably just makes money for some people, fine, but more of the profits, of those commercial profits, need to come back to people. So that is what the Pluto tool does. And for reasons of time, I'm not going to walk you through the whole Pluto tool. It's freely available online, but just to show a glimpse of what it looks like, there are about 20 questions. If, by the way, you are a patient and you cannot answer the questions, that's already an indication that you haven't been given the right information about data use. If anyone wants to use our data and doesn't give us enough information to answer most of the questions of Pluto, that's a bad sign already.
Barbara, it's Derek here. So we just have about 1 minute left.
Okay, sorry. I was told 20 minutes, but I'll be quicker. Yeah, then that's what Pluto looks like. You get a result like this. It also tells you counterfactuals. Your score would have been higher if this and this and this would have happened, if the data user ensured that the data also benefits wider ranges of people and so on. So given that I have only about 30 seconds left, I'm not going to go through this slide now. So solidarity-based data governance or data solidarity cannot solve all problems, but it contributes to the solution of many problems. And here I really end. There's a glossary that is available also freely online in English. And thanks to Birgit Bauer and many others, it will soon be available in German. So and it's available in Dutch as well. So we hope that we have piqued your interest, and thank you very much for listening to me. I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and we can see you now. So, so the room, just for your own benefit, has about maybe 25, 30 people in it, and I could see people furiously writing down and scribing. So I suspect you'll be there'll be a few people getting in touch with you shortly. But also, I also noticed that my colleague in Ireland, Aisling McMahon, has been working with you from the University of Maynooth, and it's great to see her work being highlighted. So the purpose of Barbara's scene setting was very much to then see, okay, the kinds of things that Barbara has been talking about, and what really struck me there was, no matter what type of health data you're talking about, when you ask patients in the public what they would like it to be used for, no matter if it's anonymized, pseudonymized, or personal data, it's part of their identity. It's very much, health data is special, and when you delve deeper into people's preferences, it is very often associated with their own identity. It's part of who we are. And that relationship aspect that we have with our data, whether we have access to it or not, is a key factor to understanding why certain uses are acceptable and maybe why certain aren't to different populations. So I'll kind of open it up to the panel now and maybe introduce each member, but I'll go straight to Doreen. Doreen Tembo is from Health Data Research UK. And Doreen, please tell us maybe a little bit about yourself and why you've come to PEOF, and maybe what your perspective is on what Barbara has introduced to us.
Yeah, sure. So I lead the patient involvement and engagement team at Health Data Research UK, and with another hat, I'm also the strategic lead for a multi-organization partnership that transcends health. So it looks at health and non-health, recognizing that there's common ground in terms of public engagement, and also that we can facilitate cross-learning between the different areas. Barbara's talk was really insightful, really useful to know what's happening in other countries around this issue of public value, or in the UK, we would say public benefit. Within HDR UK, just going back to one of the points, actually, let me just backtrack and say why I'm here. I think mostly it is that diffusion of knowledge and finding out what others are doing. I think there's a real danger, and it's a shame that the UK has kind of pulled itself out of Europe, because I think you then do start developing in a silo, and without concerted effort, such as, we've kept our links with Europe and the rest of the world very much strong during this difficult period. That really diffuses learning and makes sure that you're not going off in one trajectory while best practices are being developed in other areas. So it's been a fantastic couple of days. So just to address why I'm here. And also, I think, we also have learning that we can share with others. So I think it's really important to have a platform to do that. So it's been great to network with colleagues. So my reflection is this issue of what is public benefit, but also, as Barbara highlighted, the real concerns that people have about what's done with their data is a very real and hot topic at the moment. Within the UK, we've had data breaches recently. And because some of the data that Health Data Research UK works with, not that we keep the data, but we work with our partners that have data registries or in fact 57 million records of people that use the healthcare service in the UK. And wonderful work's done with that, such as AI models that are able to predict future risk of disease. And that has, outstanding benefit to patients, to the public. However, the harms that Barbara highlighted are very real. So I just wanted to share an example within the health data research space. So HDR UK, Health Data Research UK, really values the public, and we have them at the heart of everything we do. And it's not just a nice slogan that I think people throw around to say that the public are at the heart. We have them as part of our governing structures. So we have about 15 members, and this is people who both support data use, but also people that don't support data use, and as Barbara mentioned, linkage between health data and other areas for some valid concerns. So we recognize that people are entitled to have an informed decision about how their data will be used. Unfortunately, this isn't always possible in the UK context because data is routinely collected and then it is used for research and for planning and for audit type purposes as well as care. So the example I was going to highlight was the fact that often people talk about building trust, but in actual fact, I think we need to build trustworthy systems. So I think it's about taking the onus off people and putting it on the people that are actually doing the research and the regulation and the information governance, as we've heard. And what our public advisory group, the public members did, is they actually started their own citizen science project. So we also host a partnership organization of healthcare organizations, academic institutions, research institutions, industry, and public partners as well. And what the group did is they reviewed all of the data access and website processes and systems of the member organizations within that consortia or partnership of data custodians, as I said, and other partners. And what they discovered was that it wasn't transparent at all about how people were able to access that data, what was done with the data, what was required as well of people who were actually accessing the data. A couple of months later, another technical group started doing a similar kind of research, reviewing websites and sending out a questionnaire to those members, and also discovered that those organizations were not adhering to best practice with available frameworks at that point. And it became apparent that the two groups were kind of working in silos and were brought together by Health Data Research UK. And then they got together to actually co-produce a set of standards, transparency standards, that improved how people were accessing data, ensuring that public members were actually involved in decisions about who accessed this data and how, and making sure as well that the reason for use and the impacts, as was mentioned in terms of public benefit, were made evident on the data custodians' websites. And we also recognized then that it was one thing to kind of name and shame people that weren't doing things well, but what do you then do about it from a system type perspective? So what we did as Health Data Research UK, but also as this alliance, this partnership of 120 organizations, is we put out a funding call, quite modest in nature, about 10, 15,000 pounds. And we gave that to organizations to actually improve their processes and to produce assets that would help both improve their websites, but also to actually work with public partners to explain the process, to demystify health data research. And that was taken up by about 19 organizations. And one of them actually won an award for their animations that demystified health data research to the public. So it was just really to highlight that I totally, agree with the points that Barbara mentioned. And I think this showcases how very small investments can have a marked impact on the whole data sector.
Thank you, Doreen. A really wonderful example, and I might even come back to you as to what kind of criteria you use as part of your funding call to ensure that actually organizations were adhering to those principles that you talked about. I might turn to Charles. So Charles Alessi is someone who's familiar to us in the Synergist team, but not least because of the From Treatment to Targeted Therapies program, FT3. And Charles, you're also representing Nightingale Health, and that's in the area of predictive and
predictive
health.
Public health.
Predictive public health. So could you tell us a little bit about where, because I think Doreen's point about taking the onus off people and off the individual is an interesting one for if we're talking about predictive and
well, I'm just going to take the whole audience out of their comfort zone over the next 5 minutes, and I really do mean that, because what I'm going to try to do is really bring a confluence of all the things that are happening around the world at the moment, and how it's going to affect healthcare, and more importantly, perhaps for the audience here, how it's going to affect the organizations we represent and the tasks we do. So, and I think it's really one of those times where everything's happening at the same time, from workforce crisis in terms of healthcare, there aren't the people to look after the people as they used to be, to the fundamental changes which digital health has come with. In other words, personalization of care becomes much more possible, to the change of approach in terms of the way we manage care, insofar as lifelong treatment is now the norm. People start being treated for type 2 diabetes the moment they're born, by not getting it, in other words, by thinking in terms of preventative measures to stop developing conditions, from cardiovascular medicine to metabolic medicine to dementia to cancers to everything else, to the science which is available now, which is really quite extraordinary, which I'm actually not going to mention because this isn't promotional, but it really is around the fact that we do have the possibility at the moment with the omic revolution to be able to predict really quite accurately the trajectory of every individual over a 10-year period in terms of their deterioration or improvement, depending on the action they take, in cardiometabolic disease. Now, the inference of all of this means that by taking a small amount of blood and doing a little test, I am suddenly able to know where the likely place I will be in 10 years' time is in terms of my cardiovascular risk, my renal disease, my lung disease. This is really scary. I'm suddenly in a position where I know where I'm going. I'd even go further. My likelihood of developing really cognitive impairment and dementia, some conditions for which there are no effective treatments yet. So there are big ethical issues in all of this discussion. But I'm actually going to go a little bit beyond that with the 2 minutes I have left, because it is a really important issue I wish to bring to your notice. You are likely, as patient and citizen representatives, to be the people who are going to drive health systems in the future. Health systems are not going to be the health systems we have today, tomorrow. They're going to be very different. The meaning of value is not going to be determined by the clinical fraternity, by physicians like myself, but more by societal views and societal wishes. The fact that people are going to be expected to rely on themselves, to self-care, to really think in terms of themselves investing in their own lives is going to become much more prominent. And governments, often for financial reasons, will be pushing that towards citizens much more. So people will be potentially shamed. There is a possibility that people are potentially shamed for not looking after themselves as well as they could do. These are big things I'm talking about. And I don't think we're really ready to start to determine how on earth we're going to cope with a world which is going to be so different to the world we have today, I think we have an opportunity to start that thinking of how are we going to manage a situation like that, to ensure that the worst and most dystopian scenarios, which we can all imagine this will lead to, will actually not go to. I think there are ways through this around ensuring we explain the importance of individual responsibility, despite the fact that people still, hopefully, will have a free choice in terms of what they do and how they lead their lives. But the potential for us to be able to predict has become so significant that it really is inevitably going to lead to us rethinking of how we manage our lives and how we manage our health systems. I think this is an important debate. I think it would be a pity if we talked about the science of omics, because actually that's for the geeks. And anyway, we only have 21 seconds, so I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Charles. I think that kind of incision into the conversation will hopefully spark some questions into the Q&A, because certainly from my perspective, having that dialogue with the public is a key essential part of that, because if you can't create spaces for the dialogue, then you'll never really know what the public actually want. So the technology push is always going to come from that side. The technology will evolve, but how the public can be involved in determining the types of uses, in actually articulating their preferences, that only comes from things like citizen-based approaches. So maybe Holger, so Holger Bartos from Boehringer Ingelheim, and Holger, if I might ask you that question in terms of, so Boehringer doesn't just develop medicines. You're in the digital health technology arena as well. But how do you incorporate those kinds of preferences and needs into the design and the development of these new technologies in a way that actually builds the public trust, but then also ensures public value?
Thank you, Derek, and thank you for your vision of the future. And if we have a look where we are currently with digital health tools, then we see that the implementation in society is limited, and I think Barbara shared this, or you had it on your slide, it's limited by the speed of trust. And I think that's very important and a very important point to consider, and maybe I can't share the industry perspective here, short disclaimer. I share my personal, let's say, path to patient engagement. So I'm by training a molecular biologist and biochemist, and I started my career in a biotech startup company, and all we had in our mind was mode of action and stability of the molecules. And then I moved to biopharma. I worked for biopharma, and there patient safety was an important topic, but still patient involvement, patient engagement was not on the radar at that time. I worked in medical device development, and most of the digital tools here are considered medical devices as well under the regulatory aspect. And there you have to involve patients in usability tests, for example, but normally this is quite late in the development process. The design is almost fixed. And then I moved to digital health because Boehringer, as a pharmaceutical company, wanted to explore what are the opportunities in digital health for a pharmaceutical company, and we piloted a lot of digital health tools. We partnered with a digital health company to develop Boehringer Ingelheim's first digital therapeutic, a prescription digital therapeutic, which was also, we had to convince our colleagues here. It was also about trust, about data safety, data privacy. And but now we have our first digital therapeutics under development. I also piloted with hundreds of patients 5 different adherence management tools. So smart pill boxes, smart blisters, and so we interviewed patients. They used these devices for 6 months in their daily life, and I learned so much about the importance of of involving patients early in the development process, because what we measured was the adherence to the adherence management systems. So you could see the well-designed adherence management systems, people stick to it, used it in their daily life, while the ones which did not fit into their daily life, people stopped over the period of 6 months using it. So this was my aha moment. And then I moved to patient engagement, and then we created together with patients and patient organization representatives and colleagues from device development a guideline for early and systematic involvement of patients in device development, because this really creates the trust, the transparency you need, that these, and it creates good products. So this is what you need to be successful later on the market. This guideline was also is now part of our corporate device development handbook, but we also published it on the Synapse platform here for everyone, and it also works for digital health tools. Because, as I said, these are medical devices in most cases. But we also learned that besides building trust, transparency, ensuring data privacy and data security, something else is maybe even much more important, and this is digital health literacy in society. And this is why we have supported the European Digital Health Academy, Birgit Bauer's organization here, who has developed a glossary about the technical terms, turn technical terms into understandable information. And I think this is very important if we really want to implement digital tools, digital health tools in the future in our health ecosystems. We really have to work on the digital health literacy of our populations. That's a key success factor for me.
Okay, thank you, Holger. And that's an easy segue as a moderator to Birgit. Birgit, you've long advocated for much more systematic patient involvement in digital health across all types of solutions. But I guess you've heard a couple of comments here that I'm sure from a patient's perspective or watching it through that lens, you can maybe give us a sense check of that. But also might ask you, what do patients actually need to actually feel confident that what we've been talking about is actually what they want?
Okay. Let me introduce myself. I start with your starting questions, and then let me summarize all the things I heard now, because I have some questions. My name is Birgit Bauer. I'm from Germany, and I'm the project coordinator of Data Saves Lives Germany. And I'm also founded the non-for-profit organization, the European Digital Health Academy, and we are building a platform for patients to understand more about those digital thingies. What is not so easy, Derek said it in the beginning, it's a huge buzzword, but what is behind? That's the thing. I'm also an expert for digital health. I'm a journalist, speaker, and much more. And this is my third PEOF. Guess what? I'm the third time here in Baveno, and I want to say thank you to the organizers because it's one of the events I really love to go, because I learned so much. I have a very high-level exchange in the patient organizations, and I learned something new. And this is great, and a great network behind. And I think this must be said also. So, to you guys, you talked a lot about trust, digital health, and also things, but you forget one thing. And I was really waiting for it. Who explains it? This is one of the needs we have. A lot of people living outside. And I want to talk about citizens, not just patients, because this is not just for patients or a disease-specific thingy here. We are talking about people, no matter if they are sick or not. I'm living with multiple sclerosis myself, so I'm on the patient side, but I see also a lot of citizens having lots of questions and want to know more. But nobody explains it. If you go to a government, and I was at the Patients' Rights Day in the European Parliament 2 weeks ago, they always say, oh, it will be great. people have the EHDS. But guess what? Nobody explains it. What is the EHDS? Go outside, ask a person. They will not be able to explain it. And this is what we have to do. This is digital health literacy. And I want to expand it a bit. Digital health and data literacy, because we have to know what's behind. We should not start to throw some buzzwords in the room and expect people to understand that. They will not. They need easy explained, understandable explanations placed on very prominent places. And they should have the opportunity to go to platforms to inform themselves, easy accessible. And also they should have experts in the room to find an explanation if they have questions. And now we're coming to the word I heard so often here and also during the last days. It's about trust. How we can build trust with information. If people know what we are talking about and how they should use it, they are informed. When they are informed, they can trust because they know more about it. This is one thing. The other thing is, and I was really happy to hear that also from you, Holger, let people be part of it. Also, Barbara said, is citizen science, also Doreen. It's such an important thing. We have to ask the people, what do you want? What do you need? What do you expect? And this is what I'm doing also with the Data Saves Lives Germany community. I ask always, so what do you expect? What do you want? Sometimes they say something, sometimes they are a bit shy because they are patients, and health data and digital literacy is really a hard thing. It's not easygoing. It is something hard. It has, I would say, difficulties. It has so much challenges in it, and we have to make sure that they understand what the challenge is and how we can solve that. And the other thing is the give back. So Barbara has talked about giving something back from data. This is also another issue we have. So lots of people give data, but what do they have back? And I'm coming with maybe not the best example. I have this thingy here, and I know the deal. The data goes to Apple, very clear. But there is an app behind, and I get data back. It says very clear, your walking balance is not good. You have to exercise. Or maybe you should do more exercise to shape your body a little bit more, because we can see that your health values or your biometrics are not so good. It says something to me, it gives me something back, and this is what we also need when we share health data. And also I agree with Barbara, data is not the new oil, data is human. And everyone should know how data is used. And last time I was in a discussion panel, and one representative of the pharmaceutical industry said to me, and we had a hard discussion afterwards, he said to me, oh, patients should give the data, maybe we can give something back in 20 years with a new medicine. And I said, no, this is not acceptable. You need to give your knowledge, the information you gained with those data, much earlier back to the people, because it can help to make a decision. It can help a patient or a person to make a decision. This is health data sharing, and I would say one part of data solidarity we should have too in this whole game. So last but not least, my call to action also to the patients: be active, inform yourself, ask for information if you need something, and start to, I would say, stress out the industries, the politicians and the governments with your wishes, your needs, and also your concerns, because then we can change something. And I've seen it also in the European Parliament. I never thought that I have that influence, but it works. And the more we can come together and the more we go hand in hand, no matter if it's a patient organization, an independent patient, the more voice we have and the more we will be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Birgit. I might ask if any of the other panelists would like to respond to that. Yeah, Doreen?
No, I 100% agree with you about the issues with data literacy. In fact, we've been having a conversation about how we can potentially work together on that. I would actually like to push it a bit further. Because in the UK, we have a great organization called Understanding Patient Data, and they put out explainers. They've started translating them into different languages that are representative excuse me, of the sub-communities we have within the UK. I think the challenge we still have is, before I started working in data, I never heard of understanding patient data. And data stayed something that was for other people. You know, I worked with data scientists. I'm not a data scientist. I didn't get involved in it that much. I think the challenge we have as organizations is we can write tools, explainers, but how do we get them to the people? I think that's a real challenge for us organizations. I think we need to challenge ourselves. You know, our organization recently moved away from all the usual comms and got onto Instagram. And I would say very late. I mean, a lot of people are not using Instagram. It's for us older people now. So it's about how do we reach communities the way they want to be reached, to actually do that health literacy and research literacy data training. I think it's still a big challenge. It's really the interested patient or citizen that's going to look up these different organizations to get involved. Hence, you predispose yourself to a very select few people that might inherently have some interest in what's being done with their data. So totally agree with you, but I think I'll put the challenge as well, apart from on patients, to organizations. How are you going to reach people?
Thank you, Doreen.
Just one sentence to add, because I think I read in the Compass newsletter from your organization a very nice quote and a very important question: how can we make health data sexy again? And I think this is probably really the key question, and I pass on the question to you.
My sense is you both I'm surrounded by people who actually work in areas where they are doing their utmost to actually forward this concept around health literacy and data literacy. My contention and my provocation to the audience, actually, in my intervention, was that this is going to happen to us sooner than we think. The fact that we're going to be forced to take more control over our data and forced to take more involvement into our own health means that your task of getting people interested, at the moment, is a spectator sport because you feel you're not making the ultimate decision. But suddenly you're going to be put in a position where you're really invested in this. And because you're invested, you're going to have no bloody choice but to get interested. So I think you're on a winner. Both of you.
Thank you, Charles. There are interesting parallels with the AI session from yesterday, because when we talked about how AI-based technologies were being introduced, that the fear associated with these technologies was something that is all too pervasive. So the way in which digital health now needs to look at things in terms of what part of your new technology is actually incorporating artificial intelligence, and to what extent then are you going to, can you be transparent about how that AI tool is actually coming to the conclusions that it is. So it's adding another layer of transparency that's increasingly being asked for by the public. But again, it comes back to Birgit's point about, well, who does that explaining, and to what extent can you explain? So there's this added layer now through the introduction of artificial intelligence that, again, adds an extra degree of complexity, particularly for when you're maybe trying to reach those communities who are traditionally underserved by digital technologies. So for anybody trying to design spaces that will be inclusive, to try and not even elicit responses, but to actually even discuss the uses of the data in an appropriate way, that is, I think, the challenge for an awful lot of innovators, because there's no real kind of standard of what, apart from what maybe Doreen has talked about, in terms of what are the requirements that are necessary to ensure that transparency actually happens. And we're hoping to do that amongst the co-creation sessions in terms of what are simple, practical things that either innovators or indeed patient groups or any other stakeholders in the audience can be doing to just move the needle forward on that piece, because trust comes in many shapes and forms. And for this session, we're going to focus primarily on transparency. But before we do, we've had a Q&A. We've had a QR code up there for a while, and I know that there's people online as well. Have we had much questions come through from online? But we'll go to those in a second, sorry. But if anybody wishes to respond to that burning question about what we've been asking to date, or indeed anything that the panelists have brought in. Jamie, I saw your hand up. If we can get a microphone to Jamie. And Daniel, and then one down the back. Yeah. We have a second microphone here. Yep. So.
Okay.
Not
Hello?
really.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Thank you all so much for the panel. It was amazing. I have a quick question, and it's honestly kind of with the setting of the stage that Barbara did. I'm curious about data philanthropy. It was a question around, from me, she basically stated that a lot of people are not trusting where the sources are coming from or where you're actually giving your data to. And I wanted to understand from you all's perspective, if I am a person who wants to do crowdsourcing and I, quote unquote, want to have data philanthropy where people are giving their data to me, whether it be wearable data, whether that be their EHR, who should be actually collecting that data and who should actually be doing data philanthropy? Because it can't not be, from what it sounds like, nonprofits, unfortunately, because it's not trusted as much, and it doesn't sound like it maybe should be industry. So who is the person that should be actually doing data philanthropy?
Doreen, yes, you have your hand up.
I'm not sure I got the very end of your question. Was the question around who should be collecting the data to kind of enable that trust from
It's
people?
more of the trust part. So like, for instance, I'm a patient and I want to give my data to someone, but it sounds like many of the sources that typically would be collecting that, whether that be a nonprofit or a for-profit entity, it seems like that trust isn't there. And for us to be more, I guess, involved with changing the system, who should actually be the source that's doing and holding that for data philanthropy? I'm just curious. From your perspective. I mean, obviously we don't know, but I'm curious.
From my perspective, I think it's actually a really hard question to answer because data comes from lots of different sources. I think Barbara highlighted this, and research we've carried out and partners have carried out around people's perceptions within the UK also highlights the fact that people trust public sector bodies within health, I should say, very distrustful of immigration and policing and all of that kind of stuff. But they trust the healthcare system. So from a UK perspective, we have routinely collected data, which is just collected when you go to the hospital or you do something that collects your administrative data. So there's that, and I think people trust the validity of that, although I would question some of the, the robustness of that data. I was told by a colleague working in policing, for example, that how they determined people's race was that the police officer looked at you and determined what race you were, and that was how data was collected, and that's what's on the system. So I think there is some challenge around the quality of the data, even from public sources. Other sources do come from registries, charities might collect that kind of information. Some big data actually comes from research. So you might have longitudinal studies or cohort studies that collect massive amounts of data over long periods of time. So it's actually spread out in lots of different sources. And the trend at the moment is to try to link those sources so that you can triangulate and do lots of research on different sources of data. And there's different models of doing that. Some people actually share the actual data, and I think there's a lot of risk with that. So in the UK, we're pushing for federated models where actually you don't send the data to anybody, but the data is analyzed in a secure environment. And I think that's the trend we're seeing in the UK, and definitely something that we're seeing at across EU level in Europe as well.
You're going to ask some of those questions, or what? Because there's a question to me, that's why I was going to answer it, but perhaps I will when the time is right.
I'll do the room first, and then we'll go to the audience. So I think Daniel's hand was up.
Charles, I'm going to solve that problem, because I was the one putting the question to you, so now I'll also put it orally and not just on the screen. I share your, let's say, anxiety of this dystopian future where instead of what we have now, namely a socialization of risks and benefits, we are going to push it out to the individual and say, oh, we'll educate you, here you go, here's your app. But your app shows you didn't walk. Now you pay for your health. I mean, how do we avoid that?
I think that's a really good question. I spent 2 years agonizing about answering that question in a different context. It's a really important question, and I don't have an obvious, easy answer, as you would expect. In a previous life, I was lead for risk reduction in dementia for England. Now, we now know in dementia that if you take care of your cardiovascular health, you lessen the risks of dementia dramatically. And so I was part of a process thinking how to communicate that effectively with a population, and of course in the United Kingdom, an exceptionally diverse population, in terms of it's your responsibility to look after yourself and avoid the fact that the moment somebody develops cognitive decline and dementia, they're then told, it's your fault you got it. And that's all you need when your world is collapsing, and then you're told it's your fault. I mean, I couldn't imagine something worse. So an incredible amount of work went into the messaging around how you tell people that they have a part to play in looking after themselves, but there could be aspects where they don't necessarily have full control. The genetic imprint we're born with, we don't have that much control of. We can, however, change trajectories of healthcare depending on how we behave and our risk. I think this is going to be something which is going to be the main subject of conversation. Sorry, it was a real provocation I gave you as an audience, because I really wanted you to start thinking about this, because this is the world we're going into. So I really think we need to think about how we're going to position ourselves in it. The worst thing that could happen, in my opinion, is we get to a situation where, because healthcare becomes so unaffordable, we tell, it's your bloody fault, next time, don't take the bus and bloody well walk. I mean, I don't want to be part of creating that. I don't think any of us wants to live in that sort of society. And it's really up to us to try to find a way to manage that. I don't have the answer, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Charles. You're sure, Birgit. I think we had a question over here and here. So if you'd like to address the same question,
yeah, so I want to agree with Charles, because it's time to be proactive and take care for ourselves. So I can see that also in Germany, the trust in our health system is not really good, to be honest. It's very expensive. You have to wait for, and this is not a German problem, I know that, you have to wait for doctor's appointments for a very long time. You can maybe have 10 minutes with your doctor and to explain a complex disease or a mental health problem is not really possible in 10 minutes. So I think we have to stand up for ourselves, and no matter if we're a patient or a citizen, this is not the question. I think this is one call to actions. We really have to follow up to say, hello, if you need something, please stand up for yourself and take care for yourself and make sure that you receive the help you need. And also, you can do a lot of things in a preventional way. I know we know that all, healthy food, sports, exercise, whatever. It can help too. And I know it's not always so comfortable, so for me either. But this is something we can do for ourselves. And when we talk about a quality of life, then we should not start to expect that others come up to grow our quality of life. We have to grow it. This is our mission. And I think as the systems change so fast and digital health grows, we have to start with that. Maybe in small baby steps, but we have to start. We have to take action. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Birgit. And I believe that has somewhat addressed the question both online and in the room. We'll go over here and then over here. If you have a microphone. Oh, I thought you were.
I can just go there. Thanks for your effort. Really thought-provoking. I never realized I had so much interest in this topic until I heard from all of you. I guess maybe I'll take this in a little bit different direction. I'm an optimist by nature, I think. And so one of the things that Barbara left us with was that she hoped she piqued our interest, and she certainly did for me. So my question may be directed mostly to her, if she's still online. With this question of value to society really got me interested in, and inherently then it relies on someone's judgment or a value judgment on the value, which then becomes quite an interesting philosophical conversation, I think. But if we look historically, I think it's fair to say that much of the innovation that has benefited society may not have been anticipated, or technologies or innovation that was applied to a different field or in a different way, or maybe even very basic science, has become phenomenally valuable to society. And so I'm wondering if we sort of look at defining value in this quadrant perspective, Barbara, that you shared, do we worry about losing opportunities by placing a judgment on value in sort of the snapshot in time that we exist here? So, many innovation breakthroughs have come from, say, military innovation, right? Which you could argue may not have been that beneficial to society at that time, but have spilled over in different ways that have really benefited society. So how do we essentially keep from that pitfall?
Am I allowed to respond right away?
Absolutely, Barbara. Go ahead.
So thank you very much. I'd also like to thank the colleague who asked the question about philanthropy, and I'll say something about that as well. So about public value, this is a really, really good question. And had I had more time, I would have drilled a little bit deeper on that. So the short answer to your question would be that Pluto is really about prioritization. So in a scenario where, because I fully agree with you that benefits and harms cannot always be anticipated, in a scenario where something might unfold incredible public value, which nobody can reasonably anticipate, the worst that happens with the Pluto tool is that this data use is not prioritized because the benefits can't be anticipated. So that's not ideal. I don't have a better solution for that. I'd love to have one, but it's not that Pluto would say, don't do it. So Pluto only says don't do it when there's evidence of harm. Only then. So the red quadrant is the only one that says don't do it. And the red quadrant happens only when there's evidence of harm. So that's one thing. And I would also like to add that it's not only the case that sometimes we can't foresee beneficial innovation. Sometimes, there's increasing scholarship on the fact that whatever we call innovation, much of that is not actually contributing to the solution of societal problems. So the question is not how to support innovation per se, I think, but the question for us in our societies is how to support innovation that is beneficial to wide ranges of people in society without placing people at risk. That is what we should focus on. And will there be some false negatives? Will we miss a few instances? Yes, we will, but let's try the best we can to really support beneficial innovation. And 2 sentences on data philanthropy. I think the key thing is about who should do philanthropy. The key thing here is democratic control. Not state control or government control, but democratic control. So in philanthropies, to have a governance board that includes citizens and patients and other groups, I think that goes a long way in improving trustworthiness.
Thank you, Barbara. And I hope that that's a response to your question. Yes, please, next question. Yes.
Hello, hello.
Oh.
Can you hear? Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to revisit the previous conversation about digital health and data literacy and the important point about communicating to citizens about that issue, and also make a comment that it's clear that there's a great responsibility on people and patients to do the work themselves and just take care of themselves when it comes to being informed and many other things. As a patient, there's a great burden to take care of yourself. And so in revisiting that conversation, I'll maybe combine some of the questions I put into the QA, but I'll use this analogy regarding data literacy. So you can fill the trough with water, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't always make the horse drink the water, or maybe the horse doesn't know that the water is there. So that is kind of what I'm trying to understand a little more, and maybe the panel can comment on that. But how do you, when people are bombarded by so many things, their attention is taken by so many things, and they have such a great responsibility in many areas, how do you then bring this to their attention? You can communicate it, or you can put it out there, but how can they really absorb that? What are some ways that patients can be informed, maybe if there's a patient that just doesn't know where to look? Thank you.
I'll go for either Doreen or you have the microphone, so yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy, it's challenging. With Data Saves Lives in Germany, we were the first and we are the only project talking about health data and digitalization on a neutral, independent, and I would say in a very trustworthy way, because we do a very strong selection what we are presenting and what not. And of course, we have social media channels, because all have social media channels. And as a social media expert myself, it would be a little bit weird if I wouldn't do that. What we also offer is online sessions. So we have a very limited budget, as all non-for-profit organizations have. So we are a little bit, have to calculate very strongly, but we make the best of it. We are presenting online sessions with experts. We have a huge network, I would say, we can bring in. And we always try to bring a very diverse perspective also in our panels. So there is always a patient representative, there is always a citizen when we have one in our network, but we also have the industry, the government, and other networking experts and contacts. We can ask for statements. This is one thing. But you also have to go to the patient organizations. Sometimes it's a bit tricky, because some of them are a little bit traditional and conservative, and they don't want to hear, not always, the digital thing. But you have to stay in the conversation. And it's not easy, and you have to be there. Sometimes I'm 24/7 there, because I can see the need. There is so we had in springtime, we brought in the electronic health record in Germany. Surprisingly, it came, and nobody was informed very properly. So we tried to bring up information also back to the community, and we shared as much as we can to support that. But I think it's an ongoing challenge, and my personal wish, and I might express that, is that governments and also associations coming from citizen science come together and do it together, because we as a very small organization doing the job here, and we don't have any support from them. So sometimes they came up and they come into one of our webinars or so, but at the end, we are doing the job of a whole society. And I think this is also something what has to be changed in the future.
So there's a public value.
Exactly.
You are producing public value.
Could I suggest that actually we have a significant amount of...
Sorry, Charles, I'm just going to interrupt you for just 1 second.
Apologize.
Doreen was first.
Oh, I do apologize. I'm sorry.
Give it a go. Yeah, it's on. Yeah.
It's on? Okay. I won't repeat some of the great, mechanisms that you've highlighted. I think that, social media and those connections with patient organizations are really key within our context as well. And there's a question, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to address it, that's actually a bit related around getting this in education and to young people. Yep. So I was just going to address those. What we did is, I think going back to my point about trying things that are done in other sectors is, within the higher education sectors, their engagement with communities is very much going into the community and using, going back to your point actually about making it sexy, I'll probably paraphrase that and say making it fun. So what we've actually done is we go to both science and non-science festivals, and we use really, really simple things that will engage families and children, and you'll be surprised, adults as well. We've used things like Lego, we've used fair type games, hook a duck and things like that, so very low tech stuff. And you'll be amazed, people come in hordes. We've had hundreds come to our tents. And through those games, we adjust them so that in actual fact, while they're playing those games, they actually learn things about data science. And in that way, you're actually helping the general population have fun, learn something new. Then some of them sign up to our mailing list, and we create this big network. We've got about 300 and I think almost 400 people that have signed up, have an interest, and many more that haven't signed up but actually have, that spark ignited in their mind to actually understand a bit more about what happens to their data. So that was one aspect. Still, a select type of person still goes to these festivals. So we recognize that not all communities are going to go there. So we're pushing ourselves now in our current activity to actually reach out to community groups. So these are very small organizations that work within the community because they know best how to actually engage their communities. And we're incentivizing them to do this work by providing micro grants so that they can put on activities still kind of focused on their own aim. So we're not pushing them to put on something around data. Do what you're doing in the community, the great work that you're doing will finance that, but let's put an element of data in some of those activities. Yeah. And then the final part is work with a influencer, a gatekeeper, a respected partner. So we'll be financing an individual to do a select activity once that the relationship is built with those communities, to then get them further involved. So we recognize it's going to take a while. We just can't go into those communities and teach them stuff. They don't want to learn. They want to have fun. They want to develop relationships.
Excellent. So I hope you've had some good examples. I know that both of you wanted to come back in very quickly because we want to go into the...
Yeah. And I think it's important to have this initiatives, but we need early and systematic involvement of people in their health. So I think a question which is listed here, how can we really bring this into the schools, really systematic education on health literacy right from the start. So I think that's a societal topic we need to address, because if we want to reach the entire population, then probably something like early in school would be a good start.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Final word? Okay, we'll take it into the co-creation. So, okay, folks, so we're going to do about a 25-minute co-creation where we're coming together around the round tables. So if I'd ask those of you who are over in the far corner to move up to, I think we'll go for 5 tables, is that right? Or 4? So if we choose the ones closest to the stage, and I'd ask our panelists, well, first of all, can I just get a round of applause for the panelists and for Barbara? And thank you for joining us, Barbara. And I know you can't participate in the co-creation, but again, you've been a wonderful scene setter today and a contributor to the discussion.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Barbara.
Bye.
Focus on that one, okay. for all 4 tables. Okay. Okay, so we have 4 tables, and we're going to focus on the issue of transparency. So how you can be transparent about is the mic on? Yes? Thank you. So we're actually going to focus on the third question here, which what are the practical approaches to be more transparent about health data use? So 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 are you guys able to help with the facilitation? Or yep, okay. Yes, so please join the tables. So if Birgit and Doreen, if you could maybe be on together, yeah. Charles, I think you and I are on one. Holger, if you can join Aurora, actually. Yes, if you could join that one. And I think maybe if we join this one over here, it doesn't. Oh no, it does have somebody. Yeah. I think maybe if we join this one, yeah.
Okay, so since people is going to start coming into this room at some point because we are over time, but I just don't want to cut these interesting conversations. Can I ask one person per table to share a couple of points as a report back? Ooh. I said everyone is still. Derek, you have more authority.
Microphone on. Thank you. Okay, folks. So thank you all for the last 20 minutes. I don't know about your table, but we got about 5 or 6 examples of projects, programs, initiatives that are doing this in different ways, but obviously these are fairly recent initiatives. So it's clear that what the data solidarity concept is talking about is actually being realized in a number of different ways. So if I might just very briefly, and Aurora, how much time do we have? Key highlights per table, I will give you 1 highlight per table. Something that actually surprised you that you didn't know before you came to the table. And maybe that could be in the form of a project or an initiative that just went, wow, didn't know about that. I'm going to follow up on that. Can we go to the table with, yes, please. Can we get a microphone to you? One, very briefly.
Hi, yes, I'm Heidi Muller, representing pharma. We had a lot of discussions. One idea was presented from EATRIS, where first of all, the input from the public was asked, like, what are your needs on data sharing in being informed, followed by national campaigns, rollout by educational programs, very simple, and a diverse communication campaign, email blasts, social media, and so on. And the key thing was to bring data topics in a very simple manner, a couple of times a year, a different topic.
Thank you.
EATRIS.
EATRIS being the European Research Infrastructure for Translational Biology, or Translational Medicine. Nice.
Right. So
yes.
Very quickly from our table, something that I was surprised, like that I didn't know before, that in Norway you can get an abortion at 14 and your parents don't need to know. And at 16, your medical data is like, I mean, your parents do not have access to that anymore. And it's just the type of autonomy, like the type of decision making, you know, that I mean, it's very early, it's 16 years old, it's quite early, I think, and that wasn't like that before. And I think that's why it's very important to create like this type of awareness very early already about like, you know, health data use. So that's one of the, maybe I can say the practical approaches, like to really start early creating the awareness. And another thing that we talked about was legislation, that it's important to explain very simply what the current legislation says about health data use. For example, the GDPR, and about, you know, that people are more informed, like, what they can do with the data. Because I think that to a certain extent, being informed on what people are doing with your data helps you to make more informed decisions about opting in or opting out, or like dynamic consent. And I think that's, that's important, or we think that's.
Thank you very much. This table, and then we'll go to the final table.
I'm going to add one more dystopian feeling, because at this table it was very clear that transparency, nobody cares about transparency. Give me a very simple little thing and I'll lure you in taking my app. Oh, on Facebook, let's make an avatar. Oh, beautiful. Somebody's using your face for artificial intelligence, but I've got a nice avatar. I'm counting my steps on my watch, and the only thing I know is Apple is not transparent of how they're using the data, but I don't care. So, sorry, it's dystopian, but I continue to feel that we're fighting an iceberg here. We're not going to win this.
You forgot to mention that you'll stop using it after about 6 weeks, or you never use it.
We had the same conversation in.
Final word with somebody from...
Me? Okay, fine.
One surprising thing.
Only one.
One.
Okay, it's hard. So we discussed about fin data and how it influenced the development of the HDS. We gave good examples of IHI projects and bad examples of how Facebook decides to use their privacy policy as a weapon against their users. So I will stop here because we are out of time.
Thank you. And yes, clearly different views, clearly something that we're going to have our work cut out to try and distill down into a distinct, actionable item. But there are people in the room who have been listening. There are people in the room that have that ability to distill this down into something. So I want to thank each and every one of you for contributing to this. I want to thank all of our panelists and indeed Aurora and the rest of the team for helping facilitate. So to coffee.